Okay, let me get everything plugged in. And then you're going to come up here and watch from the camera point of view as soon as I get this up and running. Why is it not tether? Come on. Okay, gotta hang on a second while I get this to work. Ah, there we go. Okay, so why don't you all come up here so that you can sort of see what the lights do. And I'll have, this is going to be tethered, so you'll be able to see it on the computer tapped in here. I guess I could put it on the big screen. Okay, so up on the board, I put our 4 patterns that we're going to go through. So some of you are in Dean's class, right? Are any of you in Dean's class? Like, did you do these same ones?
Yeah, we did these ones.
Okay, so there may be some little differences, but generally, we all talk about the same thing. So the 4 patterns that we're going to look at are split, loop, Rembrandt, and butterfly. I stuttered there for a second on butterfly because people call it different names. So some people call it glamour, some people call it paramount. So you can sort of see, once you see what that lighting pattern is, you will know it when you see it.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to start with split lighting, and I'm going to use this $75 light. I've got like 4 of these in comparison to the $4,000 light that I used, the Pro Photos. So this is a great light that's made by Godex, as you can see, and it is, they make them 2 different models of the same light. One is daylight balanced, one is tungsten balanced. So I would say if you want to spend $75 to $100, you get this lighting kit. It comes with the head, yeah, so I'm going back to the remote control for controlling the light intensity. And actually, this, and then afterwards, I bought barn doors and a grid spot for it, which I'll show you also. But to be honest with you, for the amount of money, you really can't beat this. If you're just starting and want a light, to be able to use an artificial lighting, it's a great way to go. All right, so we're going to look at our friend Barbara, as we call her, and you can see that we're obviously starting with split lighting. Which is exactly what it means, is that we're just splitting the head, piece in two sections, one to the highlights, one to the shadow. Now, there's some variations of this, because if we, which we will in a second, if we start blocking off light, we can make it more moody. If we use like a grid spot, we can focus it so it doesn't light the whole head. So when we start looking at, well, like some of the light examples that we looked at, well, Frank Ockenfeld, Art Schreiber, and actually some of the images we looked at today, you will see some of these lighting patterns, but they've been modified to the point where they're only using a little bit. Say in the split lighting, they've got it flagged off, so they're doing a little bit of that right now to show it. And that's where we get into the modification. Everybody goes to the store and they buy this. They put it up, it's at what, a 90-degree angle to the person, and it's called split lighting. What do you do after that to make your pictures more unique or the style? You start playing with it. All right, so we're going to play a little bit with it, but I want to also point out a few things. First of all, with the C-stands, all the C-stands, they're all a sandbag that out. But we really want to use sandbags, both on C-stands and on the tripod, whenever possible. So I usually have a sandbag that has a rope on it, and this goes around here, goes down. So when I pick the tripod, it's not going to fall over. Okay, so that's one thing. Second thing is when I put my camera on the tripod, I'm always looking at the horizontal level here or on the camera, and that's where I'm starting. Doesn't mean I'm going to keep it there, but that's where I'm starting. And then lastly, we're going to use, so you don't have to have a hand light here, but you know that your in-camera light meter is not going to be the same reading as this. Right? Remember that because it has the bulb, this is called what kind of what's in your camera? What kind of light? So your reader in your camera is reading that subject because the light hits the subject, bounces off, and comes into the camera. And that's called reflecting. That's what the camera is. This one has a bulb, so I have more control over where I want to have the reading of actual light that I want to expose for. So with this meter, which is called an incident meter, I take it and I can put it on. So I can put it directly at the camera. Set it ISO 125 at 2.8. That's reading directly into the camera. And I would probably say, if I was to look through the camera and use that meter, it would probably read about the same. But that's not how I want to expose this. Does anybody want to guess why? I want to get the correct exposure on these highlights, right? So I'm going to take the meter and I'm going to put it directly at the light source. And now it comes up to 1.4. So that's a difference of one stop. One stop difference because I'm going to get direct exposure. Again, this is not skin quality, right? This has a reflective quality to it. So you see those highlights, you wouldn't normally see, on a person, unless they were using sweat or something like that, probably. So it's important to understand that if you're just going to use your camera meter, which you all are, you're going to have to be aware of that. That you want to look at the results on your LCD screen and see if you're getting a true correct exposure for the highlights. And you have some wiggle room because you've done the test. So if you're overexposed on the highlights by what, 3 stops, a lot of you will recover.
It's not great to do that, but you could be 3 stops over and recover it. Or if you're under on shadows by 3 stops, you could recover that also. But we want to get it right, into the camera the first time. Okay, so I'm setting my camera at 125. So I'm going to go with F5. And we'll do an exposure here. Okay, so if you look at this, you can see that here's the highlight right on the cheek, that's got detail. And that's the sign that we're looking for. Obviously, the shadows don't have any detail. And when we stand here and look, we see the background, right? And you might think, okay, well, isn't that going to show up? Let's see. So we can take a view. Go back here. 145, same shutter speed, same ISO, but at 0.7 f-stop, which I don't know. So that's 3 stops, 4 stops difference between the light that's hitting Barbara and the wall back there. So knowing that, I don't have to worry about seeing that. It's in the dark. Then I can obviously control this even more. I turn those off and put it on a flag, which we don't have a flag. So we're always looking to control what's in front of the camera the way that we want to see it. All right. So things I want you to look at with this is with this light, what kind of light do you think this is? Secular or diffuse? Secular. Okay. Very bright. So that's a specular light source. Now, we could easily make that a diffuse light source by doing flash. Putting something in front, power curtain, diffusion material, something we can do very easily to change it. But the quality of the light is what I want to point out. Is the hard shadow edge, and the technical name, which you don't really have to remember, but the technical name for that, so what I'm talking about is right at this very edge, where the light goes from the highlight to the shadow. And we call that the edge transfer. So when we look at the edge transfer in this, it's very sharp, delineated. There's no smoothness there, very hard. And so it gives that sort of very cinematic look to it because of that. All right, so let's look at so here's barn doors. So one of the things that we start to play with them is where we actually want the light to go. Taking it off. Now we can see that also reduced the exposure because the light. So because I'm shooting continuous light, then I have to go on a 125th second, but I want to selected, you get one stop. So what shutter speed that I go to for one stop, one 1/25th, 1/60th, and one more stop of the show. Okay, so just by doing that, it becomes more dramatic. Right? So we're able to control the light. And now we'll just add in. So they come in different size honeycomb. So focus to go smaller than this. So if you want to go not quite so focused, you can go larger. And now we come back to the value of the light should really change in the highlight. It shouldn't really change. That's not putting diffusion. So it's not blocking any light. It's just making the light focus more in the center and blocking it as it goes up and out. So it's the same thing with using scrims. If they're like streams, they come like in 1/3, 1/2 stops. It doesn't change. Scrims and grid spots don't change the quality of light. Nothing changes from a hard light to a soft light. All it's going to do is reduce the intensity and focus it. Okay, so you can see there's a difference in the way that the light, let's just go back and you can sort of see. So, you know, I could get more light off of the neck if I wanted to. And then going back to what the original looked like is more like this. Okay, so I'm not going to, I don't, and so maybe the characteristics of split light is that one half of the face is in highlight, the other half is in shadow. You can tweak this a little bit. You know, you can raise it will sort of change some of the quality of it. So just by the height of it, and to sort of change where maybe the shadow starts to happen. But the main thing is I'm splitting, you know, the face in half. So as long as I have that sort of split, you know, as many things as possible to create variations with that. One of the things I was going to point out was light stand. So this is a regular light stand. And this is two today. Put that lamp there because I wanted to be able to have more maneuverability with it. So I put it on the extension arm, and I'm able to take the arm, make the light move that arm, put it over the top of it. So sometimes it pays off to actually put the lamp there on each stand. Okay, so these questions are still like that. So what you're remembering from this is the leading factor. And obviously, what you're not good, we can bring a fill card in, shadow side, and play with fill. So right now, the lighting ratio of this. Because remember, the lighting ratio is the difference in stops between the highlight side and the shadow side. So I could measure it with my light meter, and it would tell me on the shadow side. Yeah, so it's like 4 stops difference. So if I wanted to expose to the shadow side now, I'd have to open up 4 stops, and of course, expose the highlight for 4 stops. Or I could take a nice white card or some other kind of reflective material and start filling this. And I'm able to discern, do I want a 1 to 2, 1 to 4, 1 to 8, 1 to 16? This is, as you're looking at it, this would be like a 1 to 16. A 1 to 16 ratio. Difference between the highlight measurement and the shadow measurement. All right, so let's go on to our next one, the peak light. This is the field flow light. So light stuff over here. This is the power. So in the box itself, is just information So if you have like, if you see something else, probably we can balance this light to light balance, color temperature. If you put daylight outside, so we actually have a place. That's what we do. So it's a pretty simple light. This is changing quality of light. Focus. talk to, we could, that would be.
Like something called like open this way. I found that one out the other day.
What do you say?
That all the light, this one, no.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Finally got like little balance for like proper.
It's you guys. Over there. Okay, so we're going to go to our next one, which is loop lighting. And I'll use this as our light source. And so loop lighting is defined as highlight coming from one side, shadow on the other side. But now, because we put the light centered at a 45-degree angle for the camera to begin with, we start getting shadow that starts to go off to, in this case, to the right, so the shadow goes. But it's not closing this part of the shadow. So there's always an open area where we see light. And if we pull this light, push it further that way, that shadow will close a bit longer, and eventually it's going to hit the shadow on the cheek, and that's not considered loop light. So with loop lighting, we have able to control what it looks like by raising, moving it in, moving it out. So I'm going to go ahead and shoot a frame with this, and let's explore what the shadow looks like. So, 68 watts. Okay, so that's a good exposure because again, we can see detail in the highlights. So here's what I'm talking about as far as the shadow coming from the nose going off to the camera right side. But yet you still see that space in between the cheek and the nose shadow. So that's called loop lighting. Now, there's probably 10,000 variations of loop lighting because I can move that light maybe an inch one way or the other, and it's going to change the length of the shadow, and it's still loop lighting. So it's always going to be loop lighting as long as there is space in between that shadow of the nose and where the shadow of the cheek is. As long as those are not connected, it's considered loop lighting. So you can have the light up, down, a little bit more that way, a little bit more this way, and it's still going to be part of loop lighting. This is probably the most widely used kind of light for people in probably commercial aspects, commercial advertising. It's probably the most widely used. Now, look at the other thing I want you to look at now is the quality of that, maybe that edge transfer. So when we start looking at the edge transfer of right along the cheek here, comparison to our other light, you can start to see it soften. It's turning the shade with more softness than our other light is. And again, we started with a diffuse light, that's a diffuse light, and we can make it even more diffuse by putting modification over it. And then we can control where the light is going by flags, flagging off light, or we can add that over the grid, which will But it's not, when we put the grid back on, remember, that's not changing the quality of light, that's just focusing the light a little bit more. Okay, any questions on that? And how many variations can we do with this? 10,000. All right, but the main thing is you have to watch where that shadow from the nose goes, so it doesn't close. All right. Now, the next one we're going to do is Rembrandt. It's called Rembrandt. Beautiful quality. Where the light always landed, how it shapes the face. And with that, okay, so what I did pretty roughly is I closed the loop to the peak. So now the shadow from the nose connected to the peak shadow. And if we refine this a little bit more, it forms a triangle. So that right on that cheek, it forms a triangle. So that's how you sort of identify the Rembrandt lighting, is that you'll see a triangle of some shape. Could be a little bit off like this one. But if we turn this light up a bit, that will drop the shadow down. Position of the camera, so we're able to we're able to sort of control that. And we'll do an exposure here so you can see that in the okay, so here's roughly our triangle, but I want you to sort of look at what happened to the background, the previous one, right? So this is our loop lighting that we did with the KinoFlow, and you can see that light was bleeding over to the background. So we wound up with some detail in there, and now we're back to this light, which has the barn doors on it, so it's keeping the light more within this. So one of the things, instead of moving the light for a variation, I'm just going to move this. So you could have your first the head is more pointed by the first light. And we get more of a three-quarter view of the person. So with this, we see this used quite a bit, where the person's not squarely into the lens; they're off maybe three-quarters. And with this, usually the more traditional way is that the nose wouldn't go further past the cheek turning, unless you're going after a profile. So we just
just a little bit more. This way. Just for the history of the room. Now, if the light bleeds over up into the eye, like it is right now, that's still considered a rendered light because the no shadow is connected to the heat trap. So some people like to light it where there's no spillover into the eye, but again, that's one of those variations. So again, this can be a pretty dramatic kind of light that could be used. And the effect of this using the Kino flow would be completely different, right? Because these shadows, the shadow edge would be much softer. So that's something to remember. And again, we could convert that to something more diffuse if we just put some material in front of it. But this allows you to have 6 different variations of either the fill or use it for the light. So it has a stop diffusion, a two-stop diffusion, gold reflector, silver reflector, sunlight with a high reflective, called hardboards are black. So, have you ever used this before? You know how to put it back together. So that's all. So if we just, this is way too good, but if we put this up in front of it, we can see what happens to that edge. 7 feet for the highlight and the shadow leaf. We have that name right. So we took our hard light, a specular light. Okay, so now we'll go to our butterfly. Butterfly. So camera axis, meaning that when we talk about positioning the light, we're usually referring to things like the degrees off camera right or camera left. And 180 is directly behind. So where this light is right now, what would you say is degree wise? 25? Okay. So we'd say 45 degrees camera left. So when you're in charge of like the whole field, you tell people what to do. You tell your gaffer that give me that light at 45 degrees camera left. And then put it on the right, you can map that. That's not camera left. All right, so this light comes directly as close as we can over to what would be somewhat 0 degrees to the camera. And the best way to do this is a boom. You want to do this. We can get fairly close to it here because it's right close to the camera. There. Pretty good. And for focusing,
I have it on autofocus, but I'm have it so it's on the off. And if the person is off camera, either right or left, you always want to focus on the eye that is close to the camera. Most of the time, there's exceptions because if you're look creative or you're trying to get some kind of different look, that's an exception. So we'll take a reading of that. Okay, so you can see the quality of the light is that it drops the cheeks into shadow. So it really draws the shape of the face. And then right under the nose, you see the shape of the nose being cast in the shadow. And that's sort of where the butterfly, the Paramount terminology. Paramount starts with Paramount Studios because they sort of introduced it. And again, there's for real true beauty light, we would take reflectors, somewhat in a V pattern outside the camera, they would start down here, and look like that. And with that, we could control the shadow color and then any kind of shadow and usually, if you look at 3D product photography with models, you'll see that a lot of it is lit with this kind of light, very hard light, but it's filled, and sometimes they'll use a 2 ratio, like a 4 ratio. Once in a while, they would use this kind of ratio that's very dramatic, and that's sort of not the norm. Okay. Yeah, so again, you can modify this light. This is just, sort of straight out of the box. So you can start using the barn doors and flags we had. So the other thing that we can do is feather the light. So instead of pointing directly at the subject, by feathering it, and it changes the shape of the light a little bit. But that's when you can start playing again with creating different kinds of shadowing effects with it, and it becomes much more dramatic. All right, so split loop Rembrandt watercolor. All right, so what I want to do is have you guys set up like two, 8 people. So we have 4 groups, and we pull out some lighting. So we can use this light. So what I want you to do is, in a partner, have one be United, 2, 4, and switch off, and do the other person. Okay. So I think that we have to. So why don't you go ahead and start figure out who you're going to shoot with, and get your cameras up on tripods. Anybody need tripod?
Are they relatively?
I wouldn't say as far as how we play it, so a couple of you can shoot up here. I'll just move this out of the way. So what I'm gonna want you to do is, at least one version of each of the.
I didn't realize it
I
was.
got done with that. A few weeks before.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we can get two people, two groups up here in front. So are you guys? So do you want to use?
I have used that one before.
Okay. you can use this one. Whatever you like.
I mean, it's pretty quick. Or do you go sit or go? Right, I guess, sure, I don't know.
So I'll put this over here.
So I guess wherever you want to count.
Well,
Yeah. No, I don't really care. I don't Yeah. So, like, super. I can still have so, for portraits, there's kind of like a certain. There's It's like. Yeah, so like right here. Well, well, it's.
hey, the Roman.
Hello. Oh, my God, it's so hot in here. You guys, it's like a sauna.
Was it hot where you were?
For a while, yeah, in the desert, but it got cooler towards the end of the day. But I'm full such stuff to return. Oh, yeah.
Somebody did.
Yeah.
It was cool.
You know, can I board this cart too? Can I move the stuff?
Let me move.
This is gonna roll. You guys found everything you needed?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, good.
Because you have,
and we have like to pull all the stops.
yeah. Yeah, really, for the way you go, I think it's, you know, and then, took, the fifth step.
Is there any way to like turn off this light?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So I want. Sorry, it's not what it is.
I'll put this over here later.
I wonder if we should like, because we have it like this already, if you want, you know, just so we don't have to like. That's fine. But that actually. So now. See you. What's the next? Oh, group. That's where it's at like the 45-degree angle from camera left to right. Yeah. It looks like mysterious. You say that's what. Yeah. I mean, you can check, I guess. So I'm trying to like. Yeah. So basically, there's like. There's one that comes out from the other. Cheap food on it.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
That was fun. Huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, it's pretty exciting.
Yeah.
My friends were really today, so it was fun.
Oh. If you take just a couple of more, it's just and then for sure. Yes. And then, so the render is going to do. Yes. Butterfly is like basically. Oh. I mean, you can shift the light or I can move the camera. Thank you.
Done. Luke is in the. Yeah. Okay, sorry. No, no, no.